That there are so many studies that show the mind-body connection and how that plays an integral part towards either your healing or not healing.
Welcome to the What Up Doc University podcast, your number one resource for total body wellness. Here's your host, Dr. Mike.
Aloha, this is Dr. Mike, What Up Doc University podcast and Velocity Wellness Center. Another one in the car this morning, and wanted to first thank everybody for the likes and shares on the podcast. We've been getting amazing viewership. Why am I saying viewership? Listenership on the podcast, and good feedback. You know, a lot of you guys have been sending in questions and asking questions and saying, hey, thanks for the information. So shout out to all you guys who are participating, and because it's great, you know, whenever I get participation in with the podcast, because it's, you know, it's kind of like a conversation. You know, if you're just having a conversation by yourself, it gets kind of lonesome after a while. So at least I know that I'm not just speaking into the microphone and talking to myself. So anyways, with that said, one of the things that I've been thinking about over the last week or so, and one of the biggest questions I get from patients is, hey doc, what do I do when I get a devastating diagnosis? You know, you've had all these symptoms, you went in, you got some tests done, and then here comes your medical doctor walking in with his white coat, and maybe he got labs in his clipboard, and he sits down and he says, Mrs. Jones, you have XYZ diagnosis. And it strikes fear, you know, in your heart. So what I wanted to talk today about is, well, what do you do in that situation? And I need to go back and really look at, well, why are we scared of a devastating diagnosis, and what constitutes a devastating diagnosis? And ultimately it goes back down to your psyche. You know, what's going on within the realms of your brain, and how you react to what is being told to you is ultimately dependent upon the information you've been fed, right? So if there is no context for something, you don't react to it, right? Like if you tell a 4-year-old, hey, guess what, you have cancer, they're going to look at you with a blank stare, and it's not going to affect them on a conscious and subconscious level, because there's no frame of reference, right? So when we get a devastating diagnosis, the reason why we feel something is because we've been told that it's devastating, okay? And you can look at this across cultures. You know, if there's no word or description for something, it doesn't affect people on an emotional level. So first things first is you have to ask yourself, well, why am I feeling this way? Why do I have such an adverse emotional response to what I've been told? Right? I've been told that I have XYZ disease. Why do I feel this way? Who told me that this is devastating? And why do I believe that? Right? And the reason why I always start with this is that there are so many studies that show the mind-body connection and how that plays an integral part towards either your healing or not healing. You know, and you know, people call this the placebo effect, and the, you know, with the positive reaction of the mind, or the nocebo effect of the negative reaction of the body to what's been told in a negative sense. So we have to look at the psyche, guys. Okay, that's the first place we got to start with. Now, once we kind of wrap our our proverbial heads around the idea and the the information that was told to us, we have to start asking ourselves, well, what's the truth? Okay. And the truth of the matter is that we are scared for the wrong reasons, right? Because I've asked numerous patients, well, you've been given this diagnosis, and why are you so scared about it? And they always come back with the answer of, I'm afraid of dying. And I says, well, that's an erroneous thought pattern. You can't be scared of dying because you're gonna die. The mere fact of you being born means that you're gonna die. So it's inevitable. So we can't ever fear the inevitable, and it's actually a false fear. As humans, we are only inborn with two fears innately programmed into our nervous system, which is the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. And fear of death is something that we've learned. And so if we look at it from a standpoint of, what do we actually fear? What are we really afraid of? It's not death. It's actually the suffering that surrounds it, whether it's a physical suffering or an emotional suffering. And that's what we really need to take into account. Okay? We don't want to suffer. And we've probably been told that the devastating diagnosis has some type of suffering involved with it. Whether it would be the pain and suffering of the actual disease process or the treatment itself. So we start thinking about all these things, which then will ultimately do us more harm than good, which is built upon what we've been told, right? We've been given these images of, let's take cancer, for example. We've been given these images of, well, okay, if I get the diagnosis of cancer, ultimately I'm going to die, and the treatment process is going to be very painful because I have images of people being on chemotherapy and losing their hair and vomiting and all of these things. This is what we've been painted in our minds. Okay. So we ultimately will actually think ourselves into a disease process, right? So if we look at the mind-body connection, right? Right now, if you're driving a car or running or whatever, don't close your eyes. But if once you get a chance to, close your eyes and just start thinking about biting into a nice juicy lemon. Okay? You think about see the color of the lemon, smell the lemon, and then visualize yourself just biting into the lemon. And for the majority of you, your salivary glands actually may start to increase in salivation. Okay, and this is what they started to notice in, remember Ivan Pavlov, when he did that experiment of conditioned responses, where he could he would ring a bell, and then right after he rang the bell, he would feed the dogs, and he would notice that the dogs would associate the bell with eating, and that they would salivate when they were given the food, and that even when they took the food away, just by ringing the bell, the dogs would still salivate. And this is called a conditioned response. We are conditioned according to a stimulus. So when we have a devastating diagnosis, that's also a conditioned response, which will then trigger some type of physiological response, right? We are conditioned to feel a certain way. We are conditioned to function a certain way with these devastating diagnoses. So now what do we do about this, right? What do we know we have a diagnosis that we don't like. So what do we do about it? Okay, first, ultimately, we got to go back to the psyche. We got to understand, well, what we've been told isn't necessarily the ultimate truth. Okay, so we have to wrap our heads around it. This starts decreasing the mind-body response. Secondly, you go back to the other previous episode where I talk about always get a second opinion. You always got to get a second opinion, not necessarily because you want the diagnosis to change, but to make sure that you've covered all your bases. Right? Maybe something has been overlooked. Maybe the diagnosis that you were given was not the proper one, or maybe the treatment plan that was recommended according to the diagnosis, maybe you want something else, right? And a case in point is I was listening to a interview with Tony Robbins, and he was talking about he was given a diagnosis of having a spinal stenosis. And he was given a bleak prognosis of, his doc saying, well, you'll be paralyzed and, you will have a lower quality of life. And he didn't take that as the be all and end all. So what he did was he searched around. He looked around for, well, maybe there may be another option. And ultimately he did find another option. And you guys know well and good. I mean, Tony Robbins is jumping around on stage, for 15 hours every single day, during his seminars. He's not paralyzed. Same thing goes for you, is you need to exhaust the resources. Don't just take that initial diagnosis and treatment plan as the be all and end all. That's one of the big things that I see patients, their downfall is that they ultimately take the recommendation that they were first given without exhausting all the other resources. I'm not saying that that initial diagnosis and treatment plan is wrong, but what I'm saying is look for the least invasive approach moving towards the most invasive. Okay? Because if you end up with some type of very strong pharmaceutical or surgery, those things often leave irreversible damage, which will ultimately give you other complications that you will have to deal with. Okay, so start with getting a second opinion. Now, like I said, always move from the least invasive to most invasive. Ask, is there dietary regimes that I can take part in? What types of exercises or lifestyle changes can I make to help, reverse this? If your doctor says that diet and lifestyle plays no role in this, you need to find another doctor. That's just, me being blunt there. That means that your doctor really has no knowledge and ultimately doesn't have your best interest in his, in mind here. He has his best interest ultimately, okay? So you have to be able to look at what types of things can you do, because I can guarantee you, short of, you having a severed tendon or an acute heart attack, there are things that you can do non-invasively to help your body. So you gotta start there. Then, once you have decided and all of these things start to make sense and you've gathered as much information as possible, then make a plan, have somebody on your side. You need some type of healthcare professional to work alongside you, to guide you along the way. You need another set of eyes, okay? You are the pilot of your plane, but you also need a co-pilot just in case there are things that you don't see and that you need help with. This is what I always recommend. But also make sure that the co-pilot has the same vision as you. There's nothing worse than you flying on a plane and your co-pilot wants to go to Brazil and you are on a destination to go to China, right? If you guys have two different visions, then it's going to be a very difficult and bumpy road. So you got to make sure that your co-pilot has the same type of vision as you have. Now, once you have your plan in place, once you have your co-pilot in place, then it's your job to take action. And this is consistent action, okay? You got to take that consistent action and always be checking your bearings. And you got to make sure that, the plan that you put into place is getting you to where you need to go. What does that mean? Well, let's look at some of the, there are some lab tests that you can do. Okay, I won't get into the nitty gritty of it all, but maybe starting with the lab tests that you took in order to get you to this diagnosis. Right, let's start there. Then start looking at other types of functional tests. Okay, making sure that you are dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's there. Okay, And then just, track how do you feel. I know that there are in some cases you won't necessarily feel anything, but I can guarantee that the majority of the illnesses that are we're plagued with in modern day, it's usually signs of fatigue, it's usually signs of pain, it's usually signs of having bodily distortions, whether it's abdominal fat deposition or thigh fat deposition or something like that. Use these markers to chart your progress. But note that in the course of it all, there may be turbulence, right? There's turbulence always, on plane flights, no matter what. Whether it's in takeoff, landing, or mid-flight, there's always some type of turbulence, and there's always something to attribute that to. Usually, it's a detoxification process, or maybe it's your body not agreeing with the treatment process itself. That's why you need the copilot there. Your copilot's going to tell you, well, this turbulence is being caused by X, Y, Z. Okay, sorry, I'm getting off the freeway now. This episode is going to be a little bit longer because I'm kind of passionate about this. When you get this devastating diagnosis, because I see too many people take the wrong turns and end up in places that they don't need to be. Okay, so you track your progress, but you gotta know that the journey along the way is going to take some time. A lot of people expect, well, I've started on this journey and it's been 3 weeks, or it's been a month or 2 months, and I haven't seen anything yet. I can guarantee you that you're not going to see that many drastic changes, because it takes the body time to detoxify. It takes the body time to repair and get cellular turnover. So you need to give the body time. Okay? And note that when you are doing things to actually enhance the body's ability to repair, detoxify, and rejuvenate itself, you are on the right direction, but it does take time. So you gotta be patient. Just like if you're going from LA to China, you're not gonna be in China in the first 2 hours of the flight. But you're on your way. You also gotta check, are you actually en route to China? All right, maybe your co-pilot is saying, oh, let's go to Brazil. No, you gotta make sure that you are going in the right direction. Okay? So now you are you got to stay consistent. And then the biggest thing, guys, that I see is stop dabbling. And I go back to the analogy of flying, right? If you're on your way to China, you can't just keep changing courses and say, well, maybe today I want to go to Australia, and then you change course and on your way to Australia, you're like, I want to go to Alaska. You'll never get anywhere in dabbling. So what I mean by this is, once you've chosen your course of action and you know that this course of action is going to get you to where you need to go, and here's a hint, guys. Most courses of action that you're going to take is going to get you somewhere. It's all according to what your goals are in your, with this diagnosis that you got. Do you want to be symptom free, or do you want to be healthy? There's two different things. So you got to determine and decide that. Okay. Now you got to stop dabbling. I see too many patients that they dabble. They say, hey, I'm going to try your way, doc. And I also, I want to try what my medical doctor has given. And I want to try this and I try that. Trying all of these different things won't get you anywhere. And I've seen this too many times. Patients dabbling in specific, or not being specific, I should say. And they never get results, and they never get anywhere. And they ultimately end up suffering. And it all goes back to what, guys? The first step that I told you about, your psyche. Because of the fear of suffering, what you start doing is you start looking for all of these quick fixes, because you don't want to suffer, because you've been told that you're suffering and you don't understand the process of it all. So the whole goal of these podcasts is to give you the information to deprogram, one, and to help empower you to make the correct decisions so that you can understand. Because the more you understand your body and how it works, the less suffering you'll go through. Okay, so that's pretty much what I recommend in a nutshell of what to do when you get a devastating diagnosis. Okay, hope that was helpful. If you got any questions, hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. My handles are Dr. Mike Okouchi, Dr. Mike Okouchi. Tag me or message me and hit me back with your questions. Appreciate the shares and appreciate the reviews on iTunes. And if you feel so, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. And hopefully you guys can take this information either for yourself or a friend or family member. Share this with them if they need it. But this is Dr. Mike from What Up Doc University Podcast and Velocity Wellness Center, signing off, saying be well and aloha.